Welcome everyone to this joint session, Lunch and Learn for the STC and the STC-New England chapter. We're very excited to be presenting Sara Feldman and Ben Woelk, and they're going to be sharing a whole heck of a lot about Slack and how we can use it as technical communicators. So I will keep that intro very brief. And in case you don't know who this voice is, this is Danielle Villegas. I'm the Vice President of the STC-PMC. And we're also joined by the President of the New England chapter, Paul Duarte. So we've got a nice mix of both groups. So on that note, I will turn it over to Sara and Ben. Just one little housekeeping note, if you are on the phone or on your computer, you may want to mute your audio or your mic just to make sure that we can all hear Sara and Ben clearly. And if you have any questions, just put them in the chat and we'll address them later. Okay, thank you. So Sara and Ben, take it away.
Sounds good. Well, thank you everybody for attending our third run through. I think it is the third time we've presented this now. We've actually have an agenda we're following that we probably aren't sharing, but Sara will start and walk through some of the basics around Slack, and we'll have some play time where we can interact with each other, and then we'll do a little bit of a wrap up with it. But the idea is for the session to be informal, explore, see what kinds of things you can find to do. And Sara, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, wonderful. Hi, everyone. I'm Sara. I'm the president of the San Diego STC chapter, but I'm actually dialing in today from a work trip in Austin, which is why that agenda didn't get posted that I just remembered I was supposed to do. But thank you, Ben, for doing the highlight. You know, sometimes things get missed. But yeah, we're excited to present this for the third time. Feel free to chime in at any point. In Slack will be a great place to post questions, or you could in the GoToMeeting chat as well. But if you do it right in Slack, we'll all see it. And yeah, we've done this a couple times, but happy to sort of tailor to highlight the things that you all find most interesting or relevant. So speak up if you want to know more about something. Quick high level, this is an improvement on the first two rounds, is what is Slack? We did post what's it called, a poll in here. Not too many people answered yet. That's fine. I don't know how many folks on the phone have actually used Slack before, but in general, it is a messaging app. Sometimes it's called a messaging app or a workspace. According to Slack, they think it's a digital workplace where things get done. So as Ben will highlight later on, there's lots of different use cases for Slack. It's a really common inner office, instant messaging tool. So it goes all the way from that sort of simple work internal use case all the way to dispersed communities, collaborating and getting work done. So that's what Slack is in general. What do I want to talk about? So first is licensing. This is just something lovely. Let's sign in. Oh, okay. Let me just talk about licensing then, instead of show you the licensing page. Might be
safer.
Instead of having you watch me struggle with login issues. So in general, Slack can be free. They have a free model for most people, and then there are enterprise options. For a lot of use cases, the free option can work. The key thing to know just about free versus enterprise is it has to do with how many messages get archived and are searchable. So Ben, is it 10,000 is the number?
Unless they've changed it, it's the most recent 10,000 messages, which sounds like a lot, except for the fact there's a direct messaging capability built into Slack. And with the introverted leadership workspace, I think it took us about 9 months to hit 10,000 messages because we were very chatty introverts. And so we can't access anything that was, posted from like a year and a half ago, but that was the decision at that point with it. With the for nonprofits like chapters, you can get the paid version free, or at least the paid basic version, and that allows you to do all sorts of things in terms of inviting people to just specific channels. You have limited guests. You can have people who have full access. It also keeps an archive of all of your messages that you can retrieve. So there are some pluses. And you qualify through TechSoup.
Right. So if you are a nonprofit, you do the registration through TechSoup. I recommend doing that anyway. It takes about a week for them to process your paperwork, and then you have access to a whole bunch of discounted tools and services through TechSoup anyway. So take advantage of that if you can. Okay, so high-level terminology. Let's see if my other apps links will work. There we go. So high-level things to know about Slack. We said it's a workspace, a digital workplace. And so that workspace name that you'll hear me keep saying is Slack's terminology for a sort of a singular community in Slack. So you can see on my screen here, everything you're seeing, this meerkat icon is highlighted here for this workspace. I have other workspaces that I can access here in my Slack from the left-hand column. Another thing to note while we're here is there are different ways to access Slack. This is what's called the desktop app, and hopefully most of you are logged in through the desktop app today, because there are, in general, all the functionality is there no matter how you're accessing it, but sometimes the way you access functionality is different. So for example, there's an iPad app and an Android app, and you actually can even access individual workspaces in browser tabs. And the browser experience looks similar to the desktop experience. And the reason that's important to point out is because if you become like me and Ben is next level in terms of the number of Slack workspaces that he's part of, you could end up with a lot of icons, a lot of different workspaces. And what's nice is that you can control per device, per app, which workspaces you want to have active there. So for example, I'm talking to you today from my work computer, so I have a few less workspaces sort of activated in my work desktop app, because I only have things here that are relevant to me during my work day, whereas on my personal Android phone, I have a lot more workspaces in that Android app. Anything to say about that, Ben?
No, I think that makes sense. I mean, when I share my screen later, you'll see I think I've got 10 or 11 workspaces set up now. And the big confusion for us has been, since we're connected on so many, is where were we having that conversation? Mm-hmm. So there is that, but it's really good in terms of when we look at the different use cases, you'll see why it's a good thing to have these different Slack workspace iterations, I guess is what I'll call them.
Yeah, agreed. So workspace is the high level, and then within the workspace, you have channels, which you can see over here on the left. What we're looking at right now is the general channel, and that's sort of the default catch-all channel that anyone automatically gets added to when they join a workspace. And then you can join additional channels. You can opt into channels here. We'll show you that in a minute. But they're basically like topic or like subject oriented rooms to sort of have more focused conversations. And it depends on the workspace. Some workspaces just have a small handful of channels, and then you have other workspaces like Write the Docs, for example. I don't know if you're aware of that community, but they have hundreds of channels. Some would argue probably too many channels, but that's where you can have sort of more focused conversations. Slackbot just pinged me with something. I'll show you actually what that means in a little bit. The other thing you can do is, so messaging is the main thing here. So I'm just typing in a message. This is your main sort of communication method in Slack. And then, so those messages can be shared in channels or in direct message groups. So I can direct message Ben here. And you can direct message one-on-one, or you can direct message with a couple people. So I could direct message with, let's see who's actually online. And we could say we want just the three of us to have a direct message. Whoops, can I type? Not really. Speaking of not being able to type well, I'll jump ahead real quick to one of my favorite features of Slack, probably my most favorite feature, is that if you hover over any message, you'll see a sort of a highlight come up. And if you click over these 3 little dots, it's the message actions, more actions area. You can click edit message, and you can fix any typos. Pretend I just fixed a typo there, and it allows you to edit any message after the fact, which is really fun, I think. And then, one other thing with messages is you can also create a thread. So again, hovering over, you can click this little icon here. It's how you start a thread. And it's a way to just segment conversations more.
Yeah, and this is actually a fairly recent feature. We didn't have that for a while, and it made it very difficult to have a long conversation with people jumping back and forth. But this can be very good for focused discussions as well.
Yeah, it just helps keep channels a little bit more clean. And then you do have the option when you are adding a threaded comment to have it live just in the thread on the side, or I'm going to select this box so you can see it. It still will show as threaded, but you'll be able to see it in the general area.
Yeah.
Like this. And then let me just get a little real estate here. And that's, so you can see here that I've replied to Ben's message here. And so this is a thread in Slack. And then you can see, because I selected that checkbox of show it in general, it's appearing here too. Whereas Ben, I'm guessing you did not check.
I did not, and that's part of the issue, because what I'm having is, if you look towards the top of Sarah's screen on the left, it says new threads, and that means there's something in there, but it's not showing up in the general discussion because I did not click the also sent to general.
But if you click in, it'll show you in the little sidebar. And then, of course, as you can see, we have a lot of fun with emojis. Ben can talk more about, Ben, do you want to talk more about emojis now?
So
custom emojis?
Since it's so important, Slack, the one thing that we found really quickly with Slack is it allows you to create custom emojis. So, and they're specific to different workspaces. So most of the ones I probably can't include here. I'm trying to remember what we've got that I added. I think, yeah. So we've got, and I need to send it to general and send. And so we have the shiny, drawing a total blank. So anyway, we've added a few emojis. They're a little more colorful in some of the other workspaces, depending on what people want to do. And you can actually, I think you can actually import sets of emojis as well. But it's a fun little way to react, because one of the things you can see when you hover over the options on the messages, you have an opportunity just to react. It has the little emoji plus sign on the left, and rather than putting a thread in, if you just want to chime in, and there are a few annoying and animated ones you can choose as well, but you can just kind of comment on your conversation that way. Yeah,
love it. And also, just a quick reminder, if you have any questions so far, please don't be shy. Type them in at any time. We want this to be conversational and helpful to you. So if we're, glossing over anything, happy to dive in deeper. Okay, so we talked about terminology. We talked about sort of like the basic orientation of everything.
Yeah, you're on channels private versus public at this point, I think.
Right. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Ben. So we did talk about channels, and we don't have any private channels set up in here, but let me show you. Actually, we're using this for STC San Diego, our chapter. So I'm going to toggle over to that workspace to really quickly, spinning wheel, great timing, show you a really simple indicator. Wow, I thought by the time I finished that sentence it would have connected, but it really doesn't want to.
It's getting
there. Okay, I'm going to give up and just tell you that. Nope.
Okay, well, just create one really quickly. You can always create a private channel.
Let's do that. So I'm creating this private channel really quick. I toggled that to private. I'm creating this channel. So far, I'm the only one in it, but you can see, hopefully, that there's a lock icon instead of the normal hashtag, the #, over the open channels. So this is a way to have, again, more focused conversations, but if you want it to be private, if you want it to be invite only, so maybe you have a wider group of people in the general group, but a private channel. So the STC San Diego example I was going to show you is that we invite anyone, all of our community members, into the Slack group, the Slack workspace rather, but then we also have a private channel just for our council. And so that's where, as a leadership team, we can use the same Slack workspace to do planning related conversations, but it's private to just us, not the general community. Anything else about private channels, Ben?
No, I think the use cases are where it gets interesting. And one of the things I had to check before I pop into a bunch of different Slack iterations is to actually see what's actually showing when you first get there. But we've used it for when we're recruiting for our council for next year. We have a private channel where we are sharing thoughts that we don't necessarily want everybody to see, but it's great to be able to just have that space to do it rather than trying to go back and forth in email. And I think that's one of the best replacements for email that we found in terms of council communications, although we're still moving towards using it all the time. It just makes it so much easier to find things rather than search in Gmail or whatever and try to figure out which message you're looking for. Much better for group type messaging and group type tasks in general.
Agreed. And you can almost think of it as a replacement for emailing someone and CCing the rest of the council. So with our council private channel, I can tag Alice in my message so that, and I'll show you that in a second, I can tag, well, I'll show you that right now. So it's the same way I can do this. I'll get back to your question in a second there. So I can say, I can type the @ and I can target Ben, so he'll get a notification. But notice I'm in the general group, so everyone can see this. But if I type a question for you, but maybe it's useful for everyone else to see it. So it's the same idea of CCing. So in our, as I was saying, in our council group, I can tag, I can tag Alice, but everyone in the council can see my question because maybe Walter will have something, useful to say about that. And it's implied that I know that he's seeing that question, so he should chime in if he has something to add there. I do want to get back to this question real quick that Paul asked me about editing. So I've only so far talked about how much I love the editing feature. I actually love this question because I've never considered, is it a bad thing? Because that's how in love I am with it. Ben, have you ever heard this question, or do you know anything?
No, and I'm wondering whether I can go in and edit your messaging, and that's what I'm going to check right now. Paul, it doesn't seem to allow that. I've gone into, well, it's a DM channel, so you can't see it. But when I clicked on Sarah's message, it doesn't give me an editing option. And it does give me a delete because I've got admin rights in the community. But Slack is a little interesting with this because one of the, I think, big fears in the workplace for employees was that they get into conversations and then management would be able to look at whatever they were chatting about. And Slack has got enough controls in place where that if you want to look at an archived conversation, you have to get a warrant to do it. So it's not an easy thing. Now, from the security side, since I'm an information security person and paranoid by nature now, I actually disabled the ability to create private channels for people in general because I don't know what's being shared back and forth. And it may be absolutely fine, but when you're in information security, your mind races with, oh, look at the pictures they could be sharing or something else. So you can actually, when you go into the administration areas, you can actually determine what team members can do. And, and basically, if you wanted to do private channels, that's great, but you will not be able to see them as an admin even. And that's where it got a little bit scary for me.
Yeah, that's a great point. One last thing that I want to show, there's so much here. I just want to point out that Slack has sort of endless capabilities, it seems. Every time Ben and I get on and play around, we find a new, different, fun or funky thing to do. But at its core,
No, Sarah, you've just frozen.
there are a lot of features. You don't need to know them all to be able to use Slack effectively. Like everything we've covered so far is all you would really need to know to use it successfully. But with that said, one more thing, speaking of using Slack, is notifications. So you've probably noticed that I get some pop-ups when people message me, and and there's a noise as well that comes with it. So what you can do is have a lot of control over these notifications. So within any workspace, you can temporarily snooze notifications. You can set up an auto do not disturb schedule, and you can go in here and customize things however you want. So most of the time there are some sort of default settings. So for example, Ben, you're good at explaining the nuance of the do not disturb schedule. It's auto set to like snooze notifications from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., something like that. But that's on Pacific time, right?
Right.
So did you have to edit yours?
Yeah, so well, we're still on your screen, but we can stay with that for now. But one thing you'll want to be very careful of when you set up your account on Slack and your preferences is to make sure you've got the right time zone and that you have notifications sent for when you want to receive them. Now, you'll note right above that it says your fellow Slack users can override this if necessary. So when I was pinging Sarah this morning, her Slack is set up for West Coast time because that's where she is, and it was showing that she was in a do not disturb, but I decided to disturb her anyway. So you do have the option of sending messaging.
Right. So you do have a lot of granular control per workspace, per auto default settings, and then the do not disturb schedule. And you can change this, like I said, per workspace and per device. So know in advance that you can customize that so that you can sort of control when you're getting pinged, because I know some people are tired of all the different ways they can be pinged. It's it's very controllable. So that covers most of what I want to talk about. Ben, are you ready to take over? What do you think?
Sure. Yeah, let's go ahead and swap it over.
Okay.
I think you have to hand it to me.
I just did it.
Okay. So we'll go to screen and we will show screen. I need to actually, I'll get there in a second. Too many tools. And I will move Sarah over to my side. And can you all see my workspace thing now?
Yep.
Good. Well, that's good news. Something's worked, which is always wonderful. Yeah, for those of you who were not on the call earlier, it's like things that were working perfectly 2 days ago when we rehearsed, it's like, what happened to the webcams? They're gone. We couldn't figure out how to get them back, so Danielle had to restart the meeting. So right now we're talking about the notifications and ability to snooze it, and I've already mentioned setting your preferences and making sure in the right time zone. You also have the ability to show your, set yourself to away, so that you will not receive notifications at all. Now, again, it's just like a voicemail or something like that, where you need to remember to set yourself to available again, so that people will know that, yes, you might be communicating with them. In terms of some other built-in features, and we didn't practice this, so we'll see what happens here. If you hit the plus sign, you'll notice there are a lot of things you can do. You can share actually a code or text snippet. One of the things that Slack was very popular for was for people who were doing programming where they could just share their code snippets that way. So let's see. Does that work any better? Danielle, trying to make it a little bit bigger. Next step is to try to enlarge the screen, but we'll see what happens. Okay, good. So if you check the plus thing, you can pop in a URL, which it doesn't say here, or you can add a file from your computer and just upload something, and probably a pay slip is not a good thing to choose. So I will choose something else. There's too much stuff here. So I'm just going to go ahead and upload this, and this is a large PDF, which is no purpose, but it's a different presentation that I've done. But we can share presentations back and forth on here. We can share a URL on here too. And it should give us a screenshot of it eventually. So yeah, so you can share web links and things like that as well. So it's really good about that. Now, there's some integration available with Google Docs, and we're kind of still struggling through that because one of the problems we noticed early was that it was, for me at least, it was sharing everything I was doing on Google Docs, and that wasn't really behavior I wanted. So it's something I've got to dig into and figure out what's going on with it. The other thing that's interesting, if you go to, so we'll go to the direct messaging channel with Sara, and you'll notice up at the top of the screen, there's a phone icon. So you can actually do an audio or a video call one-to-one through the free version of Slack. So most of the time when Sara and I are chatting or preparing these things, we're always chatting on video calls, which is probably why we're doing this now, because we're just so used to it, and that way you just don't get the disembodied voice. So on the free version, you can do one-to-one calls.
You can see the call history there.
Yeah.
In our
channel,
you can see the call history. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing is with the paid version, you can have, I believe it's up to 15 people on the call. We've done that, played with it a little bit on the chapter level. Sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't. I think it depends a lot upon what the individuals are actually using in terms of accessing Slack. I know it's supposed to work very well if everybody's using Chrome, but if they're not, your results may vary. It's like all of this other collaborative software. So the audio video calls are great. There are no geographic restrictions around them, and you have the option of just making it audio if you choose to. Now, in terms of app integration, we added a few apps to this one. And you'll have to tell me, is it showing the app integration?
Yep.
Screen? Okay. So if you start looking around in Slack, there is an enormous app directory. It's probably thousands of apps where they've built different APIs to work with it. And this workspace, our play space, our workshop space here, we've added a mentor bot, which we're still trying to figure out how it works, but we thought we would put it in there. We've also got an RSS feed, and I'll show you where that's going into. We have a simple poll, and then we saw there was lunch train, which looked like a more interesting way to decide where you're going to lunch. And then we saw there was Jiffy, where you can do an online library of animated GIFs. But when you scroll down, there are actually a lot of work-related things. Some of you may use Trello. You can access Trello cards and boards through here. And just scrolling down, there are tons of integrations. So pretty much Slack will support your workflow as well as whatever you're doing, in terms of if you want to use it as a community or for another purpose at all. So I think what we're going to do now is we're going to turn this over to you all to play for a bit in the Slack workspace. Practice creating channels, you can upload what's the word? You can upload an avatar. You can.
Oh, that's right, a profile picture.
Yeah, you can add yes, thank you. You can or a weird avatar if you want to, and just get in here and play with it a little bit and see what you can do with it. And we'll give you a few minutes to do that, and we'll probably play for about 10. Well, we've got this done by 12:30ish, 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll wrap up with some use cases and work through some questions. And maybe you all have discovered some things we don't know about, which is quite likely.
So I'm pasting in here a quick link that anyone can go to upload a profile picture really quick if you have one, or an avatar, or another meerkat if you're as fond of meerkats as Ben and I are. And anything that you type, I know Ben and I would both like to receive some direct messages during this time. So if you're on here and haven't sent a direct message yet, go ahead and feel free to message us anything. It doesn't have to be a profound thought.
Or direct message each other. We won't see it unless so. You can pretty much say whatever you want to say about us in your direct messages to each other. So.
Oh yeah. You can message each other how you really feel about how this is going. And one thing that I want to point out that I'm seeing right now, I can see the preview. It's like the little dots on the iPhone, right? I can see that people are typing. I haven't seen their message yet, but I can see Danielle and Steven are both in the process of typing something in this general channel. So I think that's kind of neat. It's helpful too when you're DMing someone, you know that they're working on responding, even if it's taking a minute or so.
Yes, now we have several people are typing. And if you look over on the left side of your Slack workspace, you'll see that you can tell whether somebody's available or not because they'll have a green, well, in this workspace, at least it's a green dot next to their name, but it'll be a colored dot next to their name. So, and you look at Sarah's and you can see that it says Sarah's sleeping. That's what the little Z is there.
So I am
because
here.
Because time zone challenged. Which may be true.
But,
you know.
I actually did, while you were talking, Ben, I manually snoozed my notifications only because as things were chiming in and making noise, I didn't want my computer to be making noise over your talking. So I did go up to my little snooze icon and or to my notification icon, and I snoozed just for 20 minutes. So let's see what people are asking about. So Danielle's asking, do you have to download the apps first before using what's been assigned?
It depends.
If the administrator has sort of integrated it, it's already there when you access Slack, right?
Yeah, and the other option is the administrator. I don't know whether we'll see this, so we'll try it. But if I go into administration, I can go into manage apps. And it's not going to show it because it's thrown it up into a browser window. But that allows the administrator to add apps, but you can also choose whether you want your team members to be able to add apps. And I think some of those may only be available to the team member, but usually the apps are all over the place. Some of them, there's one that works with Rocketbook, which is the little plaything I have now where I can basically write things on a page, point my phone at it, hit the app, and it puts it to whatever channel, including Slack, that I want to use. But that was all configured in Rocketbook itself. So it depends a lot on the app. And sorry, it's a really long question of, we don't know, and it depends.
Isn't that just the go-to answer for everything?
Yeah, of course. So I'm a security person. It is a go-to answer for everything.
Paul, I really like your observation there. Yeah, that Slack is replacing email in many cases. I know it was probably 5-ish years ago at this point, one of the trends making the rounds in business communication was get rid of email because it's a productivity killer. And this is kind of a fun whole separate conversation to be had about the nuance of that, right? Where if you replace email and have the exact same communication in Slack instead of email, well, you're not really being more productive. So it is a tool that requires some practice and fine tuning and optimizing over time in terms of making it be useful to you, because it can just be another channel of noise if you're not having it be useful.
Yeah, and another interesting part of that, with the paid version, you can actually email directly into Slack. And I suspect with some of the apps that we have not investigated yet, you'll be able to do the same thing. Yeah, Steve, in terms of the messages editable, I mean, I can edit my messages or I can delete other people's messages. I don't know if there have been any e-discovery cases around Slack yet. And so I have no idea what it looks like when they have to turn over the records of everything. But as a security expert, which I'll use very loosely, my concern was more activity happening that I could not see, which is okay, but I don't want channels up there that I don't know about. I mean, that just seemed like a very dangerous possible practice. Mike, you've got the use Slack for an STC coding course. That's cool. So Sarah, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so Christina's talking about how do you manage Slack along with every other social media app? Use Slack for a specific category of work. Is Slack going around? Sorry, it just moved. Is Slack going to be around for a while in your opinion? So a couple questions there. I'll answer the last one first, which is I do think that Slack is going to be around for a while. I don't see it going away anytime soon. Now, in terms of juggling it with other social media apps, this is connected to what I was talking about with email. Like anything, as you add more channels, whether it's a social media channel or a messaging tool, you do have to sort of use your best judgment and adapt over time to make the tools work for you. So the thing is about this is the workspaces, how they're set up, and the way a community within a workspace evolves sort of dictates how Slack is going to be used in that way. And Ben's going to give more examples of use cases so you can see the huge variety. And it's really up to you. How do you compare, Ben, using Slack for something social versus Instagram?
I use Slack for long-term conversations going back and forth, and that conversation, and I'm sorry, I'm looking to the side. I've got Sara to the side here, and I will pull her back so you guys can see it. Well, I don't know how many times you're seeing us now. I use Slack for extended conversations, not so much for necessarily sharing a picture with a small thing about it. I think it's well, there are two things that are very good about it. One is a much richer conversation because you can talk for days on a subject, which we've done, or months, honestly. But the other thing is it's a closed community. So unlike Facebook or other social media, now you can control, Instagram especially, you can control it's only specific people can see it. But unlike those communities, you've decided who's in the workspace, or whoever's administering it has decided who's in the workspace. And in the introverted leadership Slack, which we'll take a look at in a couple of minutes, I think we're up to 180 users registered in there right now. Now, granted, that means maybe 4 or 5 or 6 active at any one time, but that's still a vetted community. So I think I like the fact I've gotten very tired of the incivility on social media in general. We're not seeing that in the workspaces that we create. So that may be us filtering. It may be, I haven't had to throw anybody out. And I actually did set up kind of a guidelines for using the Slack workspace, which got into the please be nice to each other as a piece of it. So let's see, what else do we have?
Sharon, I love the question Sharon just asked because it's something that I meant to cover and didn't, which is Slackbot. So Ben, you are still sharing your screen. So if you hover over Sharon's message, can you ask Slackbot to remind you about it and show off that functionality? So if you hover over options, remind me about this.
Remind me about this and remind me about it in 3 hours. And that's Slack. So what Slackbot also does is it's your private channel to yourself, essentially. But you can set reminders and messages, and you can put in dates and times and whatever the message is, and it will remind you. So it's another appointment reminder thing. So.
And to the second part of Sharon's question, if you're offline and missed something of interest, so if you noticed when I was sharing my screen, and I don't know if anyone, not yet, Ben, don't click on my name, but I'm gonna message you something. And it should, in his channel there, my name and his workspace turned white and bold. And that means that there's an unread message. So that will be true in any channel that Ben is in or that you're in. And you also saw if someone starts a thread off of something you wrote, that will appear again in that left column under new threads as white and bold. So Slack is very good about letting you know when there's something that's unread. So you can always make sure that you find something that you might have missed.
Yeah, and in fact, Windows 10 has the allows you to have pop-up notifications, which, as you can imagine, it may or may not be a good thing, depending on whether you're in a meeting or not. There was a question about, where is it? I don't see it, but there was a question about how does it work with Translate? Oh, Jason, I have no idea. I didn't get a chance to look in the app directory to see what was there, but it's possible. I just don't have the information. So let's hop back a little bit. Part of what I wanted to do, I mean, you all are free to keep chatting amongst yourselves, and this Slack iteration will stay up. So even after we're done with this demo, you can still play around with it and explore it and see what you want to do, especially before maybe setting them up on the chapter level. So one of the few things that we found, and Sarah, I don't know if I've got yours this way or not. I need to pop out of your workspace. So if you look on the left, I have a lot of workspaces listed. I think I've actually muted a couple that were just kind of temporary things. But for instance, my first experience with Slack was setting up an introverted leadership community to support follow-up after a presentation I did in Anaheim in 2016. And we set this up, invited people into it, and created a community. One of the things that we've done in there is book discussions. You can see we're discussing Kevin Coyle's Culture Code book, and some very rich discussion going on around the book. So it's been very cool, and it's got its own dedicated channel. As I mentioned, we actually had a group rules channel where I've got this, and I'll probably post it into our, actually when I do that right now, it's just to show I can do it. In terms of posting group rules, because it is important, I think in today's uncivil society especially, to be able to have these things. The other thing you'll notice as I scroll down on the left is I've got a lot of private channels. One thing I'm also leveraging this Slack workspace for is doing virtual mentoring, and I have conversations with my mentees on Slack, and we also do a monthly call, and some of us are starting to again use that built-in audio-visual conferencing that's available. So that's one use case for it. On the chapter basis for Rochester, we've used it around our Community Achievement Awards, gathering information. We've used it for council meeting things. We use it a lot around our regional conference and the planning that goes there, including some lessons learned. And we've got a private one over there called Recruiting 2019, which is where we're talking about the prospects we're targeting for our council for the coming year. So it's been very good for that, for sharing information. We've got a space for agendas and all sorts of things. We're also going to start leveraging that for the mentoring program for STC Rochester, and setting up private channels for the mentor and the mentee so that they can use Slack as well. Other use cases, we're using STC Scholarship Committee. We use this as our working space for that. Much as we might use a Google Doc or a Google Drive space, we're using Slack, and it does, again, integrate with Google Drive, so we are able to share things into Slack, edit them from within Slack, and it will change the documents in the Google Drive. From the presentation we did a few months ago, there is an STC community program space. We have not seen a lot of traffic in it lately, but that space is set up for program managers and chapter presidents and SIG managers to share ideas about programming and to facilitate setting up virtual programs as a group where you'll have 2 or 3 chapters participating in it. The Community Affairs Committee actually has Slack set up. We set up a CPTC study channel about a year ago on that as well, where we've actually posted discussion questions from each chapter in the body of knowledge, the book that they're using for this. Another engagement I have is with the Higher Education Information Security Council Awareness and Training Working Group. And we set that one up, and we used it. This different boats area was a panel presentation that we just did at our Security Professionals Conference. And we use this for planning and sharing templates and things with that as well. And the last 2 other use cases I'll show you really quickly. And one we've not done anything with, but there was this really cool game released through Kickstarter called Dialect, which is about the how a language kind of grows and dies. And there are several STC folk who were interested in it, but none of us are co-located. So we set up the space so that we could actually do an online version of this game. It's 4 or 5 hours real time, and none of us had the time to actually start it, but again, it's another possible use case for it. And I also use it for one of my classes, so that I've told the students this is the fastest way to get a hold of me. Don't just send me an email, post it into Slack, and I'll get the notification right away. So again, lots of different use cases around it. I think that's most of it. Sara, you were gonna put together, show them what the simple poll looked like, and I think that's everything that we have on our outline.
So we do have a simple poll if you scroll up in the general that asks if you've used Slack before, but let me post another one here.
Yeah, here's the one that Sara posted before, but I'll slide back down.
So I'm typing in right now, and there we go. So if you look in the general channel, there is a poll there, and you can click on the little number, and that's just a fun way to collect opinions really quickly. We have our UX designer at MindTouch, where I work. Every once in a while, she'll post a couple pictures in the general thread. Let's say she's trying to get a take on option A or option B of a direction for the UI. She'll just throw it in the general and put in a poll, and it's one click for people to tell her, en masse what they prefer. So that's, a very work-specific example of how she uses it, and then you can, use it to decide where to go to lunch or collect opinions, whatever it may be. Good answers. Couple folks going to Summit. Folks I expected to see already. Too bad the rest of you can't make it, but I'm sure we'll be sharing lots of lessons and takeaways there. What else? We have a couple extra minutes if people have any additional questions or want to play around a bit. We talked about Slackbot. You also can direct message yourself. So the Slackbot direct message is a little bit more AI based, where you can sort of have Slackbot do things for you. Whereas a direct message channel with yourself, I use that often if I'm just needing to make notes on the fly. Let's say I'm walking out of a meeting and I want to jot a reminder to myself. I'll do it on my phone in my personal channel, and then I know when I get back to my computer, I can go to my personal channel and have that same information there that I need. Great poll, Danielle. I think, did it show up? Oh yeah, it is there. TBD. Oh, schedule meetings. Let's see.
I don't know if
there's
it's
also
built in. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say about formatting. So one of the things that Slack likes to do is sort of help you as you start to type things. So if you noticed, when you start to type the @ symbol, it'll start to give you samples of things that you can do. So you can tag people or groups of people. So if you do here or channel, as you start to type those, Slack will give you a little hint of what that's going to do. And as soon as you type, I think it's 3 characters. So if you go into general right now on your own and you start to type 3 characters in the message box and you look in the bottom right, you'll see it gives you shorthand for how to make your text bold, italics, just some basic, simple formatting options there. So that's useful to know. And like I said, Slack likes to sort of help you along the way with the things it knows how to do.
So I'm responding in the chat because I'm not clear on whether Patricia and Rebecca can see it, but I'll go ahead and paste the response into here as well.
Are we familiar with other apps like Yammer? I think I did use Yammer as part of an online class a little while ago. Probably similar-ish functionality. I think Yammer was designed more specifically for classroom use cases. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong, whereas Slack obviously can just be anything. But we did have someone comment above that they use Slack. Mike said they use Slack for an STC coding course, and it worked really well, just like any sort of closed community, space can work to support something like that. But I'm not equipped to give you like a feature comparison of Yammer versus Slack.
So other questions? Do you all, well, most of you are still with us. Do you like it? Is it interesting? So nobody's DM'd me. That part hasn't happened yet. But
I know I haven't gotten any. I got the one DM of the question earlier.
And I can see that Sharon, Mike, and Deborah are all available. There may be more. So the other thing with it is I only see a certain amount of channels right now, and that may actually be all of the channels in here.
Me?
But if I click on like the direct messages to see if there are more people available, it shows there are a lot more people registered in this workspace than we're currently seeing. So what you see in the navigation bar is not everything. So you will want to click, if people talk about a channel and you can't see it, you want to click on the plus sign. If you're looking to see who's registered that you could DM with, you'll want to click on the plus sign also.
And you can actually,
same thing with apps,
Yeah, and you can share. So I just typed in hashtag STC Notebook. Slack is smart and knows that there's actually a channel here. So instead, if anyone clicks on that right now, they'll be added to the channel that Ben set up. That is an RSS feed, right, Ben?
Yeah, so this is, I meant to mention that. Thank you for putting that there. So I just set up a simple RSS feed from the STC Notebook, so it all folds into this Slack channel. For work, I'm part of an IT organization Slack channel. There are numerous RSS feeds that they have going into that Slack, so they can keep up on news, whether it's Brian Krebs's daily column or somebody else. Paul, there's definitely whiteboarding. There are several apps that support whiteboarding. Most of them have an interface with Slack. The ones I looked at were all paid versions, so I didn't play with it enough to find out what we could do in terms of whiteboarding. But I know for sure there are apps that will do it. Pretty much if there's an app that you use for something at work, it probably interfaces with Slack. Slack has become very, very popular. One of the early questions we had was, do we think Slack is going to last? Will it be around for a while? That's a really tough question because, as we all know, technology is changing so quickly, and my light just popped off on me, which happens periodically because the sensor's too far away. But honestly, I don't know how long it will be around. It's been around for 2-3 years now. It's becoming more and more mature. I think what we will see eventually is probably a marketplace where there are a few leaders in this space, just like there are with Connect and GoToMeeting and WebEx and things like that. You'll see a few in Zoom. You'll see a few leaders in the space, but I think we're going to see more and more of this type of collaborative software because it really does support getting collaborative work done. And the part that it's fun is just a nice bonus.
Yeah, agreed. And then before we run out of time, I also want to say that Ben and I are reachable on many channels. This one we're going to, keep open. So at any point, feel free to type into general. I actually have my notification set up, so I get notified no matter what if someone types into general, or of course you can DM me here anytime. We do have the STC San Diego workspace that really anyone, not just STC folks, but anyone who's interested in engaging with STC San Diego can pop into there. Whoops, I just knocked my computer almost off the table. So yeah, ping us anytime if you have additional follow-up questions on Slack. If you just want to test something out, we're always happy to help you do that or give you feedback. So this does not have to be the end of our conversation around Slack.
Yep, and yeah, I agree. And I would also ask, most of the time when STC has done webinars over the last several years, it's was with Connect, which had its own set of difficulties, but we never tried to integrate webcams with it. And Sara and I have done that because, one, we found it more comfortable to actually be able to see each other as we're talking through these things. but we also feel like it provides a much more personal touch where you can actually see who the disembodied voice would be instead. So I am curious about your feedback on that. What is interesting is I do not believe the recording will show the webcams. It does in Zoom. It apparently does not in GoToMeeting. So there's some differences. But we really appreciate you all's time and the opportunity to keep building on this workshop and getting to co-present, which has been a lot of fun for both of us. And again, like Sara said, please feel free to reach out to us if you have questions. We do not know everything about Slack by any means, and it's moving, and the platform is moving very quickly in terms of what's available in it. We both like it a lot. I found that in terms of, I say, cementing social relationships, that you've got people, you're connected in Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever. This is so much better than that because you can just ping each other. You can see whether each of, I know you can see whether others are online in the other tools as well, but I don't know. At least for me, I've just found this to be a much richer experience.
Okie doke.
Well said.
Well, as you said, we are just about out of time. And, as you said, we also have this channel now open to everybody. So if they have questions later, they can always ask. Once we tie everything up, I'm going to be putting out the recording sometime, hopefully later today, if not tonight. So you'll get an opportunity to review this if you'd like. Paul, since you're representing New England, is there anything you wanted to add?
No, other than thank you very much, Danielle, as Ben, Sara, for allowing us to come in. I think it was a great topic, and there's a lot of functionality here that I think in our jobs we can use, provided that we get buy-in, but also from the chapter standpoint, it provides a lot of different communication and collaboration methodology that we can find useful. And this lunchtime hour discussion has been great for presenting ideas and coming together. We hope to do it again in the future.
Yeah, definitely. And maybe we'll get San Diego and Rochester involved too. You never know. Time differences can sometimes make a difference right there. But, well, on behalf of both Paul and myself, the Philadelphia chapter and the New England chapter, we appreciate you attending today. If you have any questions, you can contact either Paul or I or about the meeting itself. Or if you have any questions about Slack, like we said before, you've got your channel. Both Sara and Ben are definitely reachable. And we thank you for your time today. Okay.
Yes, thanks everybody.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.